Welcome back to Module 6. My name is Vikram Panchal, and today we'll be looking at a fascinating topic that I've called Taire It Down. We'll be discovering some hyper-practical ways on how to turn down the digital distractions in your life and how to turn up your presence in everything that you do. When you look at Jesus' life, he was a master of going deep. He would often find time to reflect, to focus at pivotal points in his ministry. In fact, he would often take time for solitude, and that's scattered through all the gospel stories in the life of Jesus. For example, in Luke chapter 4, before he was preparing for a major task and going and starting his ministry, he actually took 40 days to spend time alone in the wilderness. And what was he doing there? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I'm sure he didn't have a smartphone with him. I'm sure he didn't have any books to read with him. Books were not invented in those days. He spent time alone, to spend time in meditation, spend time in quietness and focus and reflection to prepare himself for the next 3.5 years of his ministry. In Luke chapter 6, before making an important decision, for example, in selecting the 12 disciples, Jesus spent a whole night in prayer to focus, to go deep, to be alone, so that he could spend time hearing his Father's voice to know who were the men who were going to surround him for the next 3.5 years of his ministry. When it comes to working through grief, Jesus realized the importance of processing grief in our life. And the truth is, we all will inevitably be experiencing grief at some point of time. In Matthew chapter 14, when his friend and his cousin, John the Baptist, had been beheaded, Jesus actually took time away by himself to mourn the loss of his cousin. And if Jesus would do that, well, you and I need to do that as well. Because Jesus was not some superhero who was going bang, 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 trying to do everything in a short amount of time. He only had 3.5 years. But he also realized the need to spend that quiet time alone to refresh himself, to recharge, to process his emotions before he went on to the next stage. In Mark chapter 6, we see a clear example of Jesus recharging after a hard day of work. When he was with his disciples and they had been busy performing miracles, feeding the hungry, helping the lost, whatever it was that Jesus found on his itinerary for the day, at one time, he actually told his disciples that it's time to take a break from all the crowds that were surrounding them and pressing against him. And he said, we need to take that quiet time alone to get some rest. In times of distress, in Luke chapter 22, just before Jesus was heading towards the climax of his life, before he would be crucified, he took that time in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he separated himself from the disciples that were nearest to him and closest to him, and he spent that time in prayer with his Heavenly Father to go deep for the hours that were waiting for him as he prepared to be crucified. The word taire comes from a French word which means to quieten, to shut up, to silence. We all need that quiet space in our life where we can really reflect, when we can go deep, focus on the calling that God has for our life, reflect on the decisions we've made in the past, and to be able to make wise decisions so we can live our life without regret and maximize the most use of our time that we have in our life. As I shared with you in one of my previous modules, time is the only unrenewable resource we have in your life. Once your day is done for today, it's never going to come back to you. Question is, how are you going to use your time so you can maximize your presence and your influence and your focus in whatever God has assigned you to do? Taking time with God, especially in the morning time, is not wasted time. It enables us to reach our highest potential. Because when you are linked in with God, you're going to be linked in with achieving your life goals and maximizing your usefulness on this earth. Some tips I'm going to be sharing with you today is how we can practice digital hygiene so that you can really maximize the use of your time. I don't know about you, but every time I see an incoming call or a message, I'm willing to tear through everything to be able to see who's calling me or to respond to that message. I think we all have that same issue. It's kind of funny, but even if you're washing the dishes or if the kids are crying, you'd rather leave everything alone than grab your phone because you hear someone calling for you. And I can guarantee you, it's not the president of the United States of America. It's probably just one of your friends or most likely a spam telemarketing call, something totally unimportant. But the fact is that when we prioritize our phone so much, we'll be willing to rip through everything just to get to that phone on time to pick it up. So how do we practice digital distractions or digital hygiene to protect ourselves from the distractions that surround us every single place through technology and especially through our smartphones? Well, the reason why a lot of people are spending time on their phones and will do anything possible to get to their phones when they hear it buzz or ring is because of this phenomenon called FOMO. If you don't know what FOMO is, it means the fear of missing out. Now, the fear of missing out is simply because we're all addicted to our phones because we all feel we are far more important than we really are. And I love this slide because it illustrates it so well. Two people wanting to hug each other after a long time would rather spend time looking at the updates on their phone than really connecting with one another. And let's get real about this, because if you think about it, anyone will do absolutely anything possible to be able to spend time on their phone than to be able to take care of the immediate duties around them. Well, the key that we need to learn today is learning the importance of being present in everything we do. Recent research had been done, and they showed that the average college student or university student spends about 120 clicks moving from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok in a single day. They will check their messages, they'll check their social media over 120 times, which basically means that even if it's just for small bursts of time, it's a distraction for your mind to refocus on the task that it was assigned to be doing. And the problem with this is that the moment we get distracted, to get our minds refocused is time that is wasted and lost and prevents us from reaching our life goals and focusing on achieving the task at hand. Being present is absolutely vital in whatever we're doing to maximize our happiness and maximize our time in what we are trying to achieve. So here are some tips that I'm going to share with you in how I've been able to turn down the digital distractions and to turn up my presence in what I'm doing, and especially in the life goals that I'm working towards. One of these I've called a newsboy. I don't know about you, but I used to be a news junkie. Every single evening before going to bed, I would just flick open my phone and say, hey, I wonder what's happening in the world. Maybe there's been a terrorist attack. Maybe there's been an earthquake. These are things I really need to know. And so before going to bed, I would say, let me just quickly check the news. It's only going to take me about 5 minutes. But guess what? 5 minutes went past and an hour went past. And before you knew it, I was discovering about all kinds of things in this world that had no relevance to my life. Before I hit the switch to turn off the lights, the last thing I remember listening about or reading about was about a new discovery of a black hole in outer space. How relevant is that for my life? I have no idea. Fascinating, but maybe not important. So what I realized is that there's something I can do, and that is to not bother looking at the news at all. And what do I mean by this? Well, sometimes when I'm driving, I will put on the news on radio, but most oftentimes I will use it for things that are more important and more productive. Why do I not bother to check the news anymore? It's simply this: because everyone else around you, in your workplace, maybe at your church, or even your family, will be more than happy to curate all the information that they've gathered from the news and tell you all the things that you need to know. I guarantee it. The next time you go to church or to your workplace or at school, wherever you find yourself situated in life, the moment you turn up, people will be telling you all the latest news throughout the day to keep you informed. So there's nothing to bother checking on the news when people all around you are more than happy to fill in the gaps. The second thing I want to share with you is how to redeem your inbox. Now here's the thing. I realized when I was preparing this module that I had unintentionally subscribed to over 50 plus newsletters that were flooding my inbox every single day. And the problem with that is that some of that information is really important and it's actually kind of useful. But the fact is, when I looked at it, how much of that information am I really using? How much time do I really have to go through every single newsletter and to see what's really going to be impactful for my life? The truth is, even for the most important newsletters from trusted sources, from companies, organizations that were linked to my ministry, no matter how vital or useful it was, I realized that for the majority of them, maybe 99% of them, I didn't really need to check those newsletters at all. So guess what I did? I simply hit the unsubscribe button. And even though they were saying that we're really sorry to see you leave, are you sure you want to leave? You don't want to stay? There's going to be all sorts of offers you're going to miss. I just clicked unsubscribe. Because once I got out of all those newsletters, it helped me to spend my time on my inbox, in my email, to focus on the messages that were most important rather than scrolling through a whole bunch of messages that had no importance and relevance to my life. Something else that I've done recently is making appointments for any hangouts, for any meetings that I'm about to take on. How do I do this? Well, I provide as much information as possible to block a long list of email chains, a long list of text messages going back and forth with the person you're trying to arrange to meet up with or to organize something together with. Here's an example of a message I might send. Hey Jen, I'm hoping to find a time to catch up with you about our upcoming speaking engagement, about your upcoming speaking engagement at our church. Just checking when may be convenient. A lot of us would probably end the message at that point. But here's the issue. You've ended it at a place that's going to cause a whole lot of messages going back and forth, that's going to spend a lot of your time. Instead of focusing on things that are important, you'll be spending it on the time trying to just organize a time to meet up with Jen. So here's something else I would add to my message from the very get-go. I would also send to Jen, I'm available Tuesdays, 10 to 2 p.m., and Thursdays, 3 to 7 p.m. Do any of these times suit you? We would just need 1 hour. We can meet on Zoom or in person. If in person, let's catch up at Cafe 101. Let me know what works best by Sunday this week. Thanks so much. So what I'm doing here is I'm going a few extra steps. Why am I doing this? Is because I want the other person to know as much information as possible to get them to do all the thinking, and in one response, I will be able to make the appointment as scheduled and avoid all the information and all the messaging going back and forth. And oh yeah, I forgot. Before you hit the send button, don't forget to include a smiley face and thumbs up emoji. So what did I do in the message? There were some time-saving things that I did. I told Jen when I'm available so that she doesn't recommend times outside of the times when I'm actually available and free to meet up with her. I also shared with her how long the appointment is going to take so that she doesn't feel like she has to block in 2 hours and ask me how long it's going to take. I told her in advance. I also gave her 2 options of how we could catch up, whether in Zoom or in person. And I let her take the pick. If it's on Zoom, well, it's easy to send the Zoom ID. If it's in person, I've told her which cafe to meet up in. And I've also asked her when to respond by. Now, this is really critical because when you're asking someone to meet up with you or to make an appointment, you often leave it open-ended. And then a day goes past, 2 days go past, 3 days go past, and it makes it very hard for you to plan your schedule for the following week because you're waiting to hear back from this person. So I often give the person a deadline and say, can you get back to me by the Sunday? Because by the Sunday, I know if I haven't heard back from them, I will go ahead and plan my schedule for the week and then have to make that appointment for the week after. So I've given all the information possible to ensure that I can best plan and manage my time and maximize the use of the time that I have. The fourth hyper-practical step I want to share with you is about phone notifications. Recently my wife was saying, I don't know why, but every single time my phone is constantly buzzing, someone's calling me, and I don't know how to get rid of this. Well, I discovered a secret a long time ago that I want to share with you, and you're going to thank me for this after today's module. 2 things that you can do on your smartphones is to silence it and turn off notifications. What do I mean by that? Well, to silence your phone is to silence the ringer from when people call you or from when you get a message. For example, when the ring call comes, you know that there's going to be a ringtone. If someone sends you a message, there's going to be a bing that comes up on your phone. So how do you avoid that? Because let's face it, we will all tear through absolutely anything to get to our phones the moment we hear it buzz. So to prevent that temptation from rising up, you simply silence your phone through a switch on the side of your phone that blocks any sounds from coming through. So you cannot hear it during the day. That then gives you the ability to take control of your phone and check it when you need to check it, rather than your phone inviting you to check it at all odd points of the day. Another thing you can do is to turn off the notifications. So how do you do that? Well, you open up settings, and once you've opened up settings on your phone, then you go to notifications, and then you scroll down and you hit show previews and then click on never. So what this does is that oftentimes on the phone, you will see that even though you've turned it off on silent, when you open up your phone, you will automatically see everybody who's called you. You've seen all the messages coming through. That's another temptation, to open up your phone and to scan through all the messages and reply to everybody. Well, that's going to take another half an hour of your time. So what I did was I turned off all notifications. So when I look at my phone, I don't see any calls. I don't see any messages that have come through, which is again a reduction of temptation for me to open up my phone and to scan through all my messages. That gives me the peace of mind to go deep, to focus on the task I'm working on, to move towards building and heading towards my life goals. Just like I said in a previous model, laying it brick by brick by brick. You don't want interruptions coming in the way to block you from doing your solid work that's going to make a difference in your life and in the lives of others. Another hyper-practical tip that I've discovered is creating a favorites list on your phone. What do I mean by this? Well, the truth is anybody can call you during the day. So how do you limit the most important people, what we're going to call your favorites, or let's say the VIPs, from being able to reach you, and everybody else who's not a VIP, this is not discriminatory by the way, everyone who's not a VIP, at least for the task you're working on, that you can leave them aside so that you do not see the phones coming through? Well, you can create a favorites list. And this happens by selecting specific individuals on your phone directory, on your phone, as favorites. You specifically label them as favorites. Then you hit the do not disturb button. That basically means that anyone who's not a favorite will not be able to disturb you. You will not see the calls coming through. Then you select allow calls from only the people on your favorites list. So anyone who's a favorite person, those who are essential, it could be your wife or a husband, depending on who is listening, or it could also be your employer, your boss, and he needs to be in touch with you on a regular basis, or whatever it is. You know you cannot miss some critical calls in case of an emergency. So you block everybody else and you only let those essential people, the favorites, get through to you. But make sure you remind your favorite people to call you rather than to message or email you, because you will not see the messages. If they call you, it will come up on your phone and you'll be able to respond immediately and take care of those urgent matters. The sixth hyper-practical step I want to share with you is having the power of voice-controlled assistants. You know, I'm a little bit slow with technology, I've got to confess, but I discovered Siri. And hey, I use Mac instead of Androids. Don't blame me for it, but it's amazingly great with the user interface and everything else, but I won't go into all the details. You have your preference, and that's great. Whatever you choose is fantastic. But I've been using the iPhones, and I find that with Siri, it's incredibly helpful, especially when I'm driving. The power of Siri is that it can actually bring up a message and compose a message just through voice activation. Because many times when I'm on my phone and I'm sending a message, you'll often find me slouched down, I'm looking at my phone, and I'm typing as fast as I can to send the message to somebody. But with Siri, what you can do is by saying, hey Siri, send a message to Anup. Well, Siri will compose the message and it will say, what would you like to say? And so you tell Anup whatever you want to tell him, and then it will say, have you finished your message? And you say yes. And then Siri will say, well, would you like to send the message or do you want to restart it? You say, if you're happy with everything, you say, I'd like to send it. And then Siri will send the message to you. Voila, it's done like that just by using your voice and not even having to use your fingers. And this is great, especially like I was talking about earlier in a previous module about double time. I use this all the time because when I'm driving, I cannot pick up my phone. So I will use the power of Siri to compose messages and speak those messages to people I need to send my messages to save me time later from picking up my phone and typing the message to those people. If you want to send a message to multiple people, the best way to do that is to separate the names of the people you're sending the same message to using the word and. For example, if you want to send one message to multiple people, for example, 3 people, you say, "Hey Siri, send a message to Jen and Ranjit and to Sarah." Then Siri will bring up all those names, and then you can compose your message and send it off to that person. The 7th hyper-practical step I want to share with you is through using WhatsApp. Now, I'm on WhatsApp. A lot of people are on WhatsApp all around the world. Chances are you're on WhatsApp too. So what do? Similar to your email, where you're getting a whole bunch of newsletters coming through that you've got to wade through for minutes on time before you get through the essential emails, it's the same with WhatsApp. People add you onto all kinds of groups. And you know what I mean by that. They could be family groups, they could be chat groups, there could be groups with your friends that you haven't seen for many, many years. All those groups are important. But most of the times you'll find that in those groups, people are sending memes, they're sending updates on the weather, they're sending all kinds of things that are not necessarily essential to your life. And it's probably going to be a time waster. So what do you do with that? Well, what I do is I use the archive feature on WhatsApp. With the archive feature, it takes all those groups, chats that you're part of, and it puts them in the archive so it's no longer visible to you. So that when you open up WhatsApp, all you see are the messages from the people that are most essential to your ministry, your work, or your family. Those are the messages that you will choose to prioritize to look at instead of spending time looking and wading through all the different funny memes that people are posting up on all those group chats that can take up all the time throughout your day. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to be using your time for a higher purpose, to fulfilling God's mission and purpose for your life. Well, here's the thing. We need to discover the power of powering off from our media and from our phones so that we can go deep into the calling that God has for our life. And that often comes with embracing our limitations. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Jesus, he in heaven was omnipresent. He could be everywhere at one point of time. But here's the thing. Jesus, when he came down to this earth, limited himself to a human body and had those restrictions just like we do so that he could be unipresent wherever he was. And we see Jesus when he was preaching to a crowd of believers, and even his own mom and his brothers were waiting for him outside. Jesus continued to preach because he chose to utilize the power of his unipresence instead of his omnipresence. He utilized the power of his unipresence and the limitations that were placed on him by being in a human body to focus and give his full attention and his presence to the activity that he was involved in that space of time. You also see Jesus, when he was eating with the disciples, he didn't go spreading the word to the whole town where they're going to be having the Last Supper. He actually had it in secret with the people who mattered most to him. Nobody else knew about this. Why? Because Jesus was embracing his unipresence. These were the last few moments he would have on this earth with his beloved disciples. He didn't want any distractions going off. He didn't want any big messages, any emails coming through, any urgent last-minute phone calls. He wanted everybody to have that dedicated time together because that would be his last moments with his disciples on this earth. When Jesus was crucified, yet Jesus, instead of letting his mind be distracted, he was focused on making sure that his mother would be well looked after, even after his death. When we look at Jesus, he embraced his limitations. He embraced his unipresence, and as a result, he was wildly productive in everything we do. The issue for most of us today is that we're letting our minds be scattered over multiple things, and as a result, we're not focused on any one thing. And what happens is that time goes past, a day, 2 days, a week, and we find that we're never really achieving anything at all. I want to encourage you today. God has given us time as a blessing. It's not a curse. Let's utilize the time that God has given to us in a way that we can fulfill our higher calling in a noble manner and use it to bless others. Embrace your limitations today. Be present in the focused activity that you're assigned to do, so that when you do it, you can give it 100%. And when that task is done, you can move on to something else that God has placed on your heart. Thank you for joining me on this special module. I'm looking forward to seeing you in our final module called Module 7, where it's entitled Building Bridges, where we will neatly put together all the essential principles we've learned over the last 6 modules. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.